Note: this story discusses themes including terminal illness. Mike Flanagan's The Midnight Club puts a chilling twist on teen dramas, as the terminally ill patients of Brightcliffe Hospice gather round the spooky table to tell ghoulish tales. What happens though, when the horror does not stick to the stories whispered amongst friends but instead seeps into real life? More pressingly, what happens when, against advice, Ilonka, Iman Benson, persists in seeking out cult-like alternative treatment? Ilonka's quest for recovery leads her down a dark road. From ritual sacrifices, poisonings and ghosts that do more than just bump in the night, there's plenty to get your head around. The teachings that were abused by the Paragon cult have deadly consequences. Who will make it out alive, and what exactly is Dr. Georgina Stanton's involvement in this twisted mess? If ever there was time for an explanation, it's now. The Midnight Club ending explained. The Midnight Club ended on a shocking cliffhanger, one that had many of us wondering who the hell Georgina Stanton, Heather Langenkamp, really is. In order to discuss that juicy tidbit thoroughly, we must first touch upon the penultimate episode. Ilonka's bid to stave off the chilling grip of death came to a crashing end when she, Shasta, Samantha Sloyan, and the other 3 of the 5 sisters embarked on a terrible ritual that saw the last 3 almost killed. If you remember, Ilonka came to Brightcliffe Hospice not to die but in search of the mysterious Julia Jayne, a former patient who had miraculously recovered from cancer during her stay there in 1968. Through her persistence, Ilonka discovered that Julia Jayne had borrowed from the teachings of a cult group that used to reside at Brightcliffe years back, called the Paragon. Though the Paragon had sullied their name with the blood of the 12 members they sacrificed, Shasta swears that Julia only supported the notion of the 5 sisters. That it was possible, through ritual, to draw on the power of the ancient Greek goddesses known as the 5 sisters for healing. It is later revealed that Shasta is Julia and she promises Ilonka that she has the knowledge to heal her and her friends. Shasta believed that Brightcliffe's location was spiritually imperative to healing, and that 5 sisters were necessary to complete this task. Something is iffy from the jump, though, as Ilonka recognizes some of Shasta's instructions are different from the ones she had advised her to use before in their failed attempt to heal Anya, Ruth Codd. For one thing, there are no personal items given up as sacrifice, and for another, the blood derived from the cut hands of the 5 sisters was placed upon the forehead of Shasta instead of Ilonka. This is suspicious because it is supposed to be placed on the head of the sick person. If this ritual were truly about Ilonka and her friends, wouldn't she be the one receiving the tacky blood thumbprints on her head? It seems Shasta has been manipulating Ilonka the entire time, befriending and using her vulnerability to sneak back into Brightcliffe so that she could perform the ritual again and heal herself. This, however, isn't even the kicker. The tea that is passed around has harmful properties and sends the 3 other women who drink it into vomiting convulsions. Luckily for Ilonka, her suspicions trouble her long enough for Georgina to burst in and urge her not to drink it. It is then that she witnesses the horrifying effects. There is a struggle, but Shasta escapes while Georgina and Ilonka perform CPR on the women, saving their lives. What happened to Julia Jayne when she disappeared? There are some gaps in the story when it comes to what happened to Julia after she disappeared, ill, from Brightcliffe and returned fully healed, but now that gulf has been filled. It turns out in the 10 days in which she went missing, Julia sought help from the defunct Paragon leader Regina Ballard, who went by the name Aceso. Aceso was institutionalized after her ritualistic blood offerings led to the death of her fellow cult believers, leaving her the only survivor. Her own daughter, who went by the name Athena, rescued the children, taking them to safety and alerted the authorities to her mother's insane practices leading to her detainment. Years later, after being cured of her insanity, she was approached by Julia, who idolized her. Aceso agreed to help and together they concocted a story about her absence, but what Julia had to give up in order to be healed is not clear. It's highly likely given Aceso's sacrifice and Shasta's attempts to poison Ilonka and Co that the price of vitality was blood, but whose? A question for season 2, perhaps. Do Ilonka and Kevin end up together? Given that they are both living on borrowed time, it is both admirable and crazy that Kevin, Igby Rigney, would feel duty-bound to stay with his high school sweetheart, even though the flame for Ilonka has been burning much brighter for a while. Thankfully, he finally gives Catherine, Emilia Baronic, a gentle nudge out of the picture, and Ilonka wastes no time in making the moves on him. To say that there is more to Dr. Stanton is an understatement. When we first meet her, she seems to be just a caring doc who sympathizes with these teens having lost her son to cancer. Now we find out that her secrets run deep. Initially she denied knowledge of the Paragon when Ilonka probed, but her conversation with Ilonka in the end reveals that she knew much more than she let on. In fact, she has been beating Shasta back with a broom at every attempt she's made to repeat her ritual of old. She tells Ilonka that she didn't admit to knowledge about the group because she didn't want to give false hope to those that were vulnerable, but it's much more complicated than that. It seems Georgina's ties with the Paragon run deeper than she claimed, as she too bears the mark of the hourglass tattooed on her skull hidden beneath her wig. It's possible, highly likely even, that Georgina is the daughter of Aceso. The Midnight Club makes a point about stating that the whereabouts of Athena have been unknown for many years. There is a huge sticking point for those eager to believe this theory is true. Like, why does Athena, born in 1924, look like a woman in her 50s when we find her in the Midnight Club in the 90s? Could it be that Aceso's ritual did indeed work? However, instead of awarding her long life, that gift was passed on to her daughter, who in some ways was purer of heart. It would give Georgina even more cause to place herself at Brighcliffe's helm. Perhaps she feels guilty about the sacrifices given in order to extend her life and feels honor-bound not to let this ideology take root in anyone else's mind. What happened to the rest of the Brighcliffe residents? It seems that the terminally ill teens finally got what they wanted, a sign from the great beyond. None more so than her roommate Ilonka. As part of their pact, they had promised that the first of them to go would send a sign to the others. This didn't happen with Tristan, who died at the very beginning, but it seems Anya was more tenacious. Her sign came in the way of a miraculously repaired ballerina figurine, and it is a downcast Ilonka who gets to share this news with the group. The same ritual that apparently didn't work saw Sandra on the road to recovery. Dr. Stanton passed on the news to Sandra, Inara Simone, who departed Brighcliffe at the end of the season. Her recovery, however, is put down to misdiagnosis, as the lab result and tests confirming that she was sick but not terminal came before the ritual. Those who were initially keen to believe otherwise were persuaded by this truth, but the Georgina Athena reveal casts a little doubt on this. Can rituals be applied retroactively? Guess we'll have to wait to find out. The Midnight Club is available to stream now on Netflix.